He unfolded the crumpled bills with trembling fingers. One, then another, then a third. The bills were soft, worn thin at the edges like him. Across the diner, someone scoffed. "Hope he didn't skip rent for this," they muttered. No one laughed loudly, but the silence was worse. Nobody helped. Nobody even looked up. Until a man in a leather jacket, quiet, square-shouldered, stood, walked up, and tapped his card against the reader. Didn't say a word. The machine beeped. Done. The bell above the diner door jingled as a gust of frostbitten wind crept in. Jonas Kell stepped in, shutting the door with a kind of reverence, like he'd done this same motion 1,000 mornings before. He paused just past the mat, eyes adjusting to the yellowed warmth inside. His coat hung heavy with damp at the hem, worn smooth at the elbows. Hands like old rope, back with a curve that came from years not pain. The place was half empty. Locals sat hunched at their booths like winter birds. It was the sort of quiet that wrapped around you, soft but watching. Jonas walked to the end of the counter, not too fast, not slow either, just the stride of a man who's learned patience the hard way. He sat, the vinyl hissing beneath him. From his jacket pocket, he pulled a neatly folded paper towel. Inside, coins, mostly quarters, a few dimes, some nickels, 2 battered pennies. He lined them up with care. Each one clicked as he set it down, a sound small but deliberate. A waitress, gum in her jaw and age, tucked behind mascara, sauntered over. No smile. "Coffee?" Jonas nodded. "And maybe eggs and toast if this covers it," he said, voice calm, almost rehearsed. She glanced at the coins and raised an eyebrow. "This ain't a soup kitchen, hun." Jonas didn't reply. He just kept counting. Click, click. Behind him, a guy in a booth leaned in to his friend and murmured, "If you've got to count nickels to eat, maybe skip breakfast." His buddy let out a low chuckle, not the least bit embarrassed. Jonas heard. Of course he did. He didn't flinch, but his fingers slowed just slightly. The waitress sighed and turned away, already bored. Just then, the bell chimed again. Someone else came in. Jonas didn't turn. He kept his head down, kept counting, kept pretending he hadn't heard the whispers bleeding through the wallpaper. If you believe that struggle doesn't deserve scorn, that some people carry their dignity in silence, you're in the right place. Stay with us. Hit that subscribe button. And if something in this moment stirred the corners of your heart, drop a comment. We read every single one. The coins sat in tidy little ranks on the counter. Jonas double-checked, then gently placed the folded towel beside them, like an offering. He didn't raise his eyes. Maybe he was afraid that doing so might cost more than breakfast. The waitress returned, slapped down the mug a bit too hard. Coffee splashed over the rim. Jonas gave a tiny nod. "Thank you." She didn't respond, just flicked a cloth across the counter and glared at the coins. "You're 40 cents short," she said, tone as sharp as chipped porcelain. Jonas reached back into his coat pocket. Nothing but lint and a forgotten button. He hesitated. I could skip the eggs. Just toast would be fine." She folded her arms. "Look, sir, I've got paying customers. This ain't a charity." At the booth behind, the same young man chuckled again. Maybe he's rehearsing for a role. Grandpa discovers inflation. His girlfriend cackled too loudly, obviously for Jonas to hear. He stared into his coffee, hands trembling slightly. He raised the mug with both hands, just to steady it. Took a sip, no sugar, no cream, just heat and bitterness. The diner sank into a tense stillness. Not silence, just that eerie, quiet people use when they know something's wrong but don't want to get involved. Behind Jonas, the bell above the door chimed again. More footsteps. Some glanced up, most didn't. Jonas didn't notice. He was busy trying to offer back a slice of toast the kitchen had already plated. "Really?" he said gently. "The coffee's plenty. I don't mind." The waitress rolled her eyes and opened her mouth to say something biting. But before she could, a low voice cut through the air like a razor. "I've got it." Every head turned. The man who had just entered now stood quietly at the counter, pulling a plain black wallet from his back pocket. His hoodie was dark slate gray, and across the chest, one word was stitched bold and clear: Titans. No explanation, no introduction. The stranger slid his card toward the waitress with a calm so solid it slowed the room. She blinked, surprised. "You sure?" she asked, unsure why she was even questioning it. He nodded once. No smile, no need for thanks. The couple in the booth chatterboxes just moments ago fell abruptly silent. The girl sank into her screen. Her boyfriend leaned back and crossed his arms, trying to wear indifference like armor. The man in the Titan's hoodie stood still, his eyes meeting Jonas's for a brief moment. Not pity, something older. Recognition. Then he turned back to the waitress. "Add eggs and sausage." His voice didn't rise or fall. It simply was. Jonas blinked. "I didn't ask him to," he began, confused. "You didn't have to," the man said. And with that, he moved to a booth by the window and sat down, not waiting for acknowledgement or applause. He didn't nod, didn't look back. He just sipped his own coffee and stared out at the pale snowfall tapping against the glass like it had nowhere else to be. The diner had stilled. Even the clatter from the kitchen paused, like someone had leaned on a remote and hit mute. Jonas glanced down. His meal, what had been half served and uncertain, was now a full plate, warm and complete. Fluffy eggs, toast stacked just right, sausage. It had been years since he'd seen a breakfast like that, let alone one served to him. He reached for the fork, but his hands hesitated. They weren't used to gestures like this anymore. Not kindness that came without judgment. Not charity that wasn't charity at all. At the counter, the waitress approached again, but something had shifted. Her eyes weren't as sharp. She slid over a small tray of creamers and a jar of sugar without speaking. No sass, no eye rolls. Just quiet. Jonas didn't eat right away. His gaze wandered back to the booth by the window. The man sat still as stone, the snow outside reflecting in the diner glass. There was something in the way he sat, shoulders straight, hands still, that didn't come from posture. It came from experience, from another time. Jonas finally took a bite. The eggs were warm, seasoned with more care than he'd expected. The sausage? Rich, real. He couldn't remember the last time someone had added anything extra for him. He chewed slowly, not from age but from something heavier, an ache in his chest that wasn't physical. It wasn't about food. It was about being seen. He glanced back toward the window booth, again empty. The man was gone, vanished like a passing gust. But his cup of coffee was still there, steam still curling in lazy spirals above it, half finished. Still warm. The waitress passed by again. She topped off Jonas's mug with fresh coffee and laid a slip of paper beside it. A receipt, already stamped, paid. She hesitated, then cleared her throat. "He said to tell you, no thanks needed." Jonas blinked. "He left?" She nodded. "Didn't want to interrupt your breakfast." Jonas looked at the receipt, then at the plate. His hand stayed on the table, steady now. Around him, the diner had returned to its familiar humfricks, tapping, soft murmurs, but it all sounded different. Softer, clearer, like the room had been rearranged just slightly. In a world that too often forgets men like Jonas Kell, someone had remembered, not with speeches, but with action. He stood, quietly, and walked to the booth where the stranger had sat. On the table lay a folded napkin left behind. Jonas picked it up, unfolded it. Nothing inside. No note. Just a habit, maybe. Or a signal. A silent echo that this man too once counted coins to eat. Jonas returned to his stool with a new kind of weight, not heavy, just real. He added cream to his coffee, stirred, took a slow sip. This time, he let himself taste it. Not just the food, but the moment. Then he whispered, not to the room but to the air, the question he couldn't shake. Why did he do that? And then, once more, the diner bell jingled. Jonas looked up, expecting another stranger. But it was him. The man in the Titan's hoodie had returned. Same calm expression, same silent, deliberate steps. But this time, he didn't sit. He just approached Jonas's table and stood beside it, letting the silence breathe for a moment. "You're Staff Sergeant Jonas Kell, right?" Jonas looked up, taken aback. "Haven't heard that title in a long time." The man nodded. "My father did." Jonas tilted his head. "I'm sorry?" The man reached into his back pocket, pulled out a weathered, creased photograph, and placed it gently on the table. A grainy snapshot: sand, smoke, shadows of soldiers crouched behind a smoldering vehicle. In the center, barely visible but unmistakably younger Jonas, gripping another soldier by the vest, dragging him to cover, shielding him with his own body. Jonas stared at it, his breath caught. "I remember this," he whispered, voice strained. "That was Ramadi. Ambush near the comms post. It went sideways fast." The man pointed to one figure in the photo, half obscured, bleeding. "That's my father." Jonas's eyes flicked over the image again. Recognition struck like thunder. Lieutenant Reyes. Took a hit to the thigh. "I didn't think he made it," the man said gently. "Because of you. You pulled him out under fire. You saved his life." Jonas leaned back in his seat, stunned. "That was over 20 years ago." "I was 8, the man said. "I remember when he came home limping, stitched but alive. Every birthday he'd tell me that story. Said, 'If you ever meet him, you'll know.'" Jonas looked at the photo again. "I didn't do it for recognition." "I know," the man replied quietly. "That's why it mattered." They sat in silence for a moment. No claps, no speeches, just two men who gave, one who received, finally occupying the same space in time. "I never thought I'd get the chance," the man added, "to say thank you." Jonas reached across the table, his eyes damp but steady. He grasped the man's hand, with strength still rooted in him. "You just did." At the booth nearby, the young man who had mocked Jonas earlier had stopped pretending not to listen. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, still staring at his phone, though the screen had gone black minutes ago. His girlfriend leaned in and whispered, "Did you hear that?" He nodded silently, folding his arms as if trying to shrink into the vinyl. The waitress had heard too. She returned, slower this time, still holding her notepad but not writing. I didn't know," she said softly, "who you were." Jonas gave a small shrug. "Most people don't. I never said." From the far end of the diner, an older man stood. He wore a faded veteran's jacket and moved with a slight hitch in his step. "Jonas Kell?" he asked across the room. Jonas turned, startled. "Yes, sir. I served out of Kandahar, a year after you rotated out. Heard your name more than once." He walked forward, extended a calloused hand, and offered a silent nod that said more than words could. Another man rose. Then a woman. Slowly, quietly, a few regulars began to gather near Jonas's table. No fanfare, no small talk, just hands on shoulders, quiet nods. A ripple of gratitude moving through the room like a soft tide. The mood in the diner had changed completely, the kind of shift you could feel in your ribs. Then the owner emerged from the back broad frame, white apron smeared with gravy stains. He paused, scanning the room, then made his way over to Jonas's booth with a kind of reverence. "Sergeant Kell," he said slowly, "if you ever want to eat here again, it's on the house, every time." Jonas looked up, overwhelmed. I can't accept that." The owner shook his head. "You already did enough. Some of us just forgot what that looks like." Then, without asking, the owner pointed toward the bare wall beside the counter. "I'd like to put that photo up there, the one with you pulling that soldier to safety. We'll frame it," the owner said, nodding toward the empty wall, "with your name beneath it." Jonas didn't reply at first. His eyes stayed locked on the Walensee, cluttered with high school football flyers and pie-of-the-day specials. But now, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, someone wanted to remember him, not out of pity, but pride. And that was something he hadn't realized he needed. That evening, Jonas sat alone in his tiny apartment above the hardware store. The room was plain walls bare, furniture simple. One narrow shelf held a few old paperbacks and a sun-bleached photo in a wooden frame. A younger Jonas, uniformed, standing tall beside a dusty military vehicle face, half-shadowed by the desert sun, eyes bright with a fire long faded. He reached into his back pocket and unfolded the napkin the man had left behind. Still blank, still perfectly creased. Jonas smiled to himself. Some habits don't die, they just wait. Opening the top drawer of his desk, he took out a box. Inside were a few tarnished service medals scratched, never displayed, just kept. Beside them, a dog tag with a slight bend near the edge, the kind of flaw only time could create. He hadn't spoken of those years in ages. After the fire that took his old house and most of his memories, he had convinced himself it didn't matter, that the past could stay buried, like so many others. But now he wasn't so sure. He sipped his tea, eyes drifting to the quiet street below. Across from his window, the diner's roof was strung with flickering holiday lights. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. Not because of what he owned, but because of who he was, even if the world had almost forgotten. The next morning, he placed the napkin in the box beside his medals, closed it, locked it, smiled. Because for Jonas Kell, someone had remembered. And that was more than enough. By the end of the week, the diner had changed. That wall near the counter, the one that used to hold flyers and stale tape now, displayed a framed photo, Jonas's photo. The same one the stranger had carried in his wallet all those years. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, Staff Sergeant Jonas Kell, for service that asked for nothing and gave everything. People stopped to look. Some leaned in and asked questions. Others simply stood quietly, taking in the face of a man they had passed by 100 times without seeing. Jonas never brought it up. He still came in most mornings, still sat on the same squeaky counter stool, still counted out his coins not because he had to, but because the ritual stayed with him. The staff had stopped charging him weeks ago. Still, he always left 2 quarters beneath his mug, every time. A silent nod to the day everything changed. The young couple, the ones who once laughed, never returned. But new faces came, and they knew. They had heard. Sometimes parents would lean in to whisper to their kids as they passed the photo, "That's him. He's the one who pulled the soldier from the fire." Or, "That man paid for another's meal without saying a word." Jonas never corrected them. He didn't need to. He just smiled when someone nodded his way. Because recognition had never been the goal. But being remembered, being respected, that was something different. And so, in a modest town, dinnerants filled with chuckles at his expense, silence now rang louder than anyone's words. Because sometimes, the strongest men are the ones who speak the least. If this story sat with you, if it reminded you of someone who gave without asking to be remembered, share their name in the comments. And if you believe quiet dignity doesn't need a spotlight, subscribe. We tell these stories because someone should.